in Amanda Gentle, Project Manager, Roman ENG Corp., Chelsea Culp, Director of External Affairs and Communications for New Jersey American Water, Sandy Kutzing, PE, Senior Vice President, CDM Smith, and Taya Brown Humphrey, Water Treatment Plant Superintendent for Trenton Waterworks. So thank you all for coming on today. I'm going to spotlight you all so that everybody can see us. And before we learn a little bit about you, we want to learn also about our audience and what experiences they have. So I'm going to ask Mona to bring up the functional areas poll. And for audience members, so we're going to launch this poll. You can chime in with what functional area of the water industry you work in, and we'll see what kind of representation we have in the audience today. So we're getting a lot of results coming in here. Right now, it's almost 40% engineering at this point. We have some operations. We actually, second right now is communications, which is pretty cool to see. So let's see, we got about 40 people chiming in so far. So I'm going to go ahead and end this. I'll share it with everybody so you can see. So we have engineering, operations, communications are the main ones, and then a couple in construction, a couple of regulatory, water quality, and some management and leadership. So for those of you that may not be familiar with all these different functional areas, I've asked the panelists to provide us with a quick synopsis of how their roles contribute to the water industry. So Amanda, briefly, we'll start with you.
Good morning. So again, my name is Amanda Gentle. I'm with Roman ENG. I've been with my company for 17 years, and I've worn a lot of different hats. Pretty much as a project manager, I oversee the crews out in the field. I am the company liaison between the owners, the townships, the residents, anybody that needs to be involved. Everyone has my cell phone number. So we play a key role in ensuring that the work that's needed for any utility gets installed properly. Been a long time.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, Chelsea, you're up next.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. My name is Chelsea Culp. I'm the Director of Communications and External Affairs for New Jersey American Water. I've been with the company since 2015 and have moved my way up through the department, starting as a specialist doing education and outreach. But I've had the opportunity over the past 10 years or so to develop and execute all external affairs strategies, overseeing digital and social media initiatives, and really cultivating strategic partnerships with community groups, community entities, stakeholders, environmental groups across our footprint to really align with our company objectives. More recently, I've spearheaded our lead service line replacement program communications, which led to New Jersey American Water getting #1 ranking in J.D. Power's residential customer satisfaction survey in 2024. I'm also a trustee on the New Jersey section board, and also contribute nationally on the AWWA Public Affairs Council, but really overseeing customer comms for New Jersey American Water. So anything, just because Kevin, you're on this with us, anything Kevin's team does operationally, production-wise, anything that could really impact the customers, we rely heavily on our teams in the field to let us know what's going on ahead of time so we can proactively help, whether that's a proactive project or we need to respond to an emergency.
Great, thanks, Chelsea. All right, Sandy, you're up.
Thanks. So I am a consulting engineer at CDM Smith. I've been in consulting for 23 years with a focus on drinking water. I've been a project engineer, a project manager. I'm currently a strategy and technical leader with a focus on lead in drinking water. My role as a consultant, the way I see it, is to support water utilities to succeed in regulatory compliance and also providing safe drinking water to the public in the most cost-effective and sustainable way.
Great, thanks, Sandy. All right, Taya, wrap it up.
Hi, my name is Taya Brown Humphrey. I am the Water Treatment Plant Superintendent for Trenton Waterworks. I have been with Trenton Waterworks for almost 24 years. I started out as an environmental engineer, became assistant plant superintendent, and eventually water plant superintendent and licensed operator of record. My role is basically to oversee all things dealing with the treatment plant operations, water quality in the lab, maintenance, and all facets of the treatment plant.
Thank you. And I'll just send a reminder to the audience, submit your questions at any point. We're going to try to address those throughout the panel. So use that Q&A feature to submit any questions you have. So Taya, we're going to keep it with you. I know working in production, a lot of other areas rely on your team, your departments. But which functional areas do you most rely on to achieve your organization's goal? And do you see any barriers to collaboration between those different areas?
That's a little difficult to answer as far as which area I rely on the most. I think that each area plays its part, whether it's the lab, whether it's maintenance, whether it's distribution, engineering department, consultants, they all play a part in helping me achieve the goals that I'm trying to achieve for the water treatment plant. Some of the barriers that I think we have are with communication, on, like different projects. If there is a project for the treatment plant, but we aren't the manager of that project, we may not necessarily get all the communication we are supposed to get. Sandy is one of our consultants where we dealt with the lead and copper project, and she relayed information to other parties with the city, but all that information didn't get relayed to us, which led to violations as far as the materials that we reported for sampling. There's also some barriers with when it's consulting and engineers, they don't necessarily look at it from an operations perspective with some of like the design and stuff like that, or even maintenance wise. So sometimes when things are designed, we come back after the project and look at it like, oh, well, this wasn't done to do easy maintenance, or this wasn't done thinking of an operator in mind. So those are some of the barriers I've had to face.
All right. Well, Sandy, on the other side of that, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Taya. I mean, it comes, Taya and I have a great relationship, but I'm sure everybody has seen this. You're working with your project group, you're providing information, you sometimes make assumptions that information is getting to the right people. And that's been a lesson learned for me. And even still, you don't always get it right. I think it's beyond relationship building. Taya and I get along great. I know her very well. I could easily text her. But you're doing a million things. You think the information is getting to the right people, and how do you know that it is? And I don't have the solution to that, but it's relying on that trust and confirming. I think that's become a big part of my job, is just confirming that things got to the right people, that things are getting done, instead of just assuming that they're getting done. That's been a big lesson learned throughout my career. I have a special note-taking system where I make sure to double check. I put it like a week or two out and go back. And if it's something I know needs to get done, or, even if it's off my plate, you can't assume as an engineer, as a consulting engineer, you can't assume, oh, I provided that report, I'm sure that utility is going to get it into the regulator. Done, I'm done. Technically, that's all we need to do. But if you don't succeed, if data goes out of compliance, we certainly don't succeed. So you have to do that extra level of service to make sure they get a million emails. Like they might have missed it. You got that text, that phone call, that, hey, deadline is tomorrow, just want to make sure you got it in. Those little things like that, providing that extra service, I think is something that I try and do and teach my teams to do. I don't know if that answer your question. I mean, it really depends on project related, and it ends up being more people than you think it's going to be, more groups that need to be included in the conversation than I think we ever include. I don't know if I've ever been in a project where like everybody that needs to be there is actually there. You might start out with a smaller group and then need to keep expanding.
Yeah, and I want to go over to Chelsea because Taya mentioned communication, and I know, Chelsea, you're reaching out to customers, you're reaching externally, but that you are the communication expert. So give us your tips.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to kind of piggyback off what Taya and Sandy said, I think the other big thing there, Sandy, you struck a chord with me just recently. You know, every one of our project teams, internally and externally, just from some movement internally with our company, knowing your own bandwidth too when you're working on a project and communicating that to the project team is really critical, right? So the teams that I'm working with, there's a lot going on right now, and I've been very transparent. Do not feel like you are bombarding me when there's a deadline or you're expecting something from me or my team. Take that liberty, and I think that's an important nuance that I think we sometimes forget about is, yes, it's the communication externally, but it's also the communication internally. And I think building that relationship and knowing that you can text someone or you can shoot them a little IM or, you know, have those friendly check-ins when you know there's a deadline, because again, you're all, especially when you have consultants, you are all working towards that one goal. And if one party doesn't succeed, so knowing your own limitations and knowing where you might need to be checked or reminded, I think is important. But then the other big thing I think from a comms, when we're talking about proactive projects, depending on the size of your entity, will depend on the resources that you have from a comms perspective. Personally, I think it's sometimes a disadvantage, right? Because comms kind of is always looked at as this supporting role, and it's sometimes misunderstood as something that anyone can pick up. And not that not everyone can play a role in comms, but I do think that there is techniques to be able to deploy depending on a project. So if that's proactive project, you know, planning perspective, but also reactive. And then making sure your teams internally understand that you are there to support them, whether you're in a reactive situation or a proactive situation, but you need to have the right information. And I think that kind of gets at the nuts and bolts of it, is having that willingness and those relationships internally to be able to rely on teams to give you that information so you can help them do their job, especially if they're repairing something. You're there to kind of break that heat, deal with the inquiries so they can focus on the task at hand as safely and as efficiently as possible. So I covered a lot there, Kevin, but I felt like it was a good way to segue for comms.
Yeah, no, it's great, and it's such an important aspect of the industry. And I know you partner with everyone dealing with customer interactions when you have crews out in the field. So that's why I want to switch to Amanda, because your company, you're out in the field, you're probably seeing those customer interactions. So kind of along the same lines of what groups are important to your function, and what those barriers might be.
Sure. And again, you guys make excellent points. We can see how across the board, we all eventually have to come together. For us specifically, human resources is definitely the most important thing to us, right? We're having properly trained individuals out in the field that understand safety, that understand the work that's needed. Typical operations, like Taya, like you were saying, it's making sure you guys are providing a 2D piece of paper, and it's up to the contractor to create tangible construction, right? It's to bring the vision to reality. And that's where we all have to work together to make sure that that's being done. So financially, it's being done under budget, right? It's being to the way that you want it done. It's making sure that the technology is in place so that once we install this construction, we can relay to you exactly what was done. So 100 years from now, you can pull up this record and it's readily available. It's continuing to communicate, Chelsea. We cannot stress this enough, that communication between everybody is very, very important, specifically with the public. I think that if the public understands what's going on, it's the easiest, it opens doors, right? You have customers that are very accepting and you have others that are not. That can ultimately affect the work in the field. So communication also with the engineers is, okay, so let's say we come across a differing site condition, right? Everybody knows this term in the industry. Something has changed. Now communication comes into play. Is this something that's going to affect the next 5 minutes, the next hour, the entire shift? Am I now on downtime for a week? What can we do to, one, figure out what was different and how to overcome it without trying to I don't want to do paperwork. So I don't want to have to do change orders, any of that. So it's like, how can we all work together to still come to the same end result? And as a contractor out in the field, it is constantly changing. Every single day is different. But the key is making sure that we translate this information effectively, keep records, and be safe while we do it.
So the first thing that you mentioned there was HR, and one of the audience questions coming in was about establishing job shadowing programs or mentorship programs, and how cross-functional training might be able to better prepare somebody once they get into a role. Now they understand all the other roles to be able to better collaborate. So is that something that you or any of the other panelists do at your organizations? Have you seen any benefits of something like that?
So as far as in the field, so we are a union company. We do take on apprentices, and they are put onto crews and they develop skills. I mean, to stick somebody into a project who's never done anything before, it takes time, it takes education, and it takes practice. But you always work with more experienced people. As far as internally, I do have a small team and we all work together. I have them shadow me. They are involved in every conversation. I'm not doing anything behind anybody's back or over anybody else's head. We are all on the same page because everybody does something a little different, but at the end of the day, it's all still teamwork.
So, I mean, Sandy, you talked about your experience. You're in lead service line, but throughout your career, experiencing different projects, working on different types of things, is that something that you are trying to do, trying to teach younger generations to do so that they get that cross-functional experience and can work better across the industry?
Yep, absolutely. So I'm always, other than we have a formal mentoring program, formal training and onboarding for different roles in the company, but also I think it's really important, not something you can just read in a book or learn from an online webinar. You have to experience it. And so always trying to bring junior staff with you to shadow you into those important meetings where those relationships are happening, copying them on the emails so they understand how to communicate and, pick up on general, relationships and communications, bringing them to the conference, encouraging them to meet people and get involved in the different committees so that they can start to know people in the industry. Yeah, absolutely. That's a big focus. I really won't. I insist on every new project that I'm connected to that we bring in new people in so that we can continue to grow our depth of experience and grow professionals.
And if I could
Can I just add something to that?
Amanda.
I'm so sorry. No, Sandy had made a great point. You happened to mention conferences, and I just wanted to do a little anecdote here. So for the past AWWA conference that we just had, I did have a woman who attended with me. And although Roman does work in the water industry, we also do electric and gas. So although she's in a different division, I was like, you got to come with me. I always try to bring people from different teams, come out and experience. It never hurts to meet people. You never know what everybody else does. And she ended up having a great time and meet some great people and some good contacts. So
if I could just add too, Kevin, I think both of those points are really good. As much as it's great to have, formal programs within your entities, I think it's one of those things in this series of webinars really spotlights the fact that as an industry, especially when you are moving up in your field of expertise, always kind of like looking back and trying to bring someone up. So it doesn't necessarily, I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is it doesn't have to be a formal program within your utility or your company. Really just trying to keep that mindset of as you move through the day and like what maybe you would want it 10, 15, 20 years ago when you started and maybe didn't have access to, just really taking a moment and pausing and seeing how you can just be that champion for another individual that maybe you see something in. So I know there's a lot of talk in the industry about workforce development and just development in general. And I think it's up to the leaders or even middle management that's kind of working through it now to take some of that responsibility on their own shoulders to help develop that next generation too. So definitely leverage professional, organized programs within your entities, but take it upon yourself to kind of look for that future talent and, you know, be a mentor. And I think that is something that I think a lot of us are starting to do a lot more of in the industry. But I figured that was a good segue into that.
Yeah, and I want to stay on that idea of different leadership, because I'm sure we've all seen different leaders that don't want to get involved with the project, that think it's just not in their purview, or think they're not a stakeholder and their department's not going to be impacted. So how do you get their input? How do you collaborate with them, even though they're trying to stay out of it, but they are certainly going to be impacted by it?
Raise it up, show them that potential impact. I think, you know, I think the more professional way to say it is like show them the business case of why it should matter to them. Because if you can identify that earlier and you can identify what's in it for me, like why does this impact me? You're going to probably get that buy-in a little earlier. You know, identify the problems that they might have down the line and how you can circumvent those problems. And that goes for the public too. When you're communicating these projects to the public, you got to find why should they care? What's the impact that's going to be on their daily life? Because that's how you're going to get them engaged and be aware of the program that's going on.
And I would add to that, I think sometimes taking it on yourself as well. If someone's not realizing their impact, you know, going around, so it's not always up, sometimes it's down. But I had an issue when I was a junior engineer where there was a construction issue on one of our projects, and my PM at the time is no longer at this company, so I can throw him under the bus. But he said it's contractors, means and methods, and it was clearly something, you know, it had to be thought out. We had to come to something, but like I get triggered by that. Contractors, means and methods. Like that's just saying like you don't want to be part of the solution, and we got to come together. And you know, if this doesn't succeed, the contractor doesn't succeed, the client doesn't succeed, we're certainly not going to look good. And so we cut that. You know, I certainly did not have the experience at the time, but got the people I needed, and we proceeded without this guy because he clearly didn't want to be part of the solution and figuring it out. He considered out of scope, but it doesn't matter at that point. Like you got to come up with a solution.
Sandy, can I just ask oh, I'm so sorry, Taya, go ahead.
Just wanted to add to what they all were saying about that. One of the things we're lacking internally at Trenton Water is meeting with each department to see what was going on and how things were affecting each other. So one of the things our current director, Sean Semple, implemented was having staff meetings with every department so that you can go over what's going on in your area. And that's a way that we can figure out if this affects me, if what we're doing affects the meter department, if it affects the engineering department. So that's one of the things we implemented.
That's awesome.
Now, Sandy, you mentioned kind of that contractor, means and methods. So Amanda, from the other side, have you experienced stuff just getting dumped because somebody doesn't want to get involved? They don't want to, you know, keep you in the loop from day one at the early design stage, and they're just at the end kind of dumping it onto you?
So there are benefits to a design build in the beginning where they are taking input from the contractors to develop a plan that works for everybody. Because again, I hate to keep using the term different site conditions, but there are things that we just cannot necessarily, we can't consider everything that's out in the field, right? So as long as we have that open communication from the beginning, or even if we're just doing an open bidding process, having all of the information available, taking the time to answer questions within a reasonable period that allows the contractor to take those into considerations are all very important. But while the project is going on, in my opinion, when you say contractors, means and methods, I think the only reason I would say hold on now would be if it were a safety concern, right? If something is, you want something done, but I can't safely do it in the manner that you want, you may get some pushback from us. And then again, we would have to come up with a way to make that happen. But there's not often, I mean, you work in tandem with everybody involved, and you always come up with a solution.
Okay. So I want to throw it to one of the audience questions, and it's about leveraging change management practices to kind of overcome some of the barriers between these different functional areas? And I know, Taya, you had mentioned kind of getting these siloed departments together. So is that something that you're leveraging, different change management practices or different business processes? You said you had a new director that's trying to push this stuff. So can you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I wasn't necessarily pushing this, but I see the importance of it now based off of the meetings that we're having. Is that sometimes you don't realize how important the projects and other departments are going on that may affect you. So say, for example, customer service. If we're not collecting money for bills, that affects us because we don't have the money to do the projects we need to do. If we're having a treatment problem, that affects distribution. So say we shut the plant down, they have to be made aware. So there's different things that are going on that affect us as a whole, that by meeting together with everybody, we are learning, and it's not finding out after the fact now, it's learning about it beforehand.
And Chelsea, in the beginning, you mentioned how many different roles that you have, how many different departments you have to communicate with. Is there too much information sharing? Like what's the limit? Where does it go too far?
I think you have to strike a balance, and I think externally and internally is different. But I think when it comes to change management, consistent communication is really important about topics that matter and tailoring it for maybe subgroups, right? Different states or different departments, and how it affects them. But I would say from change management practices in general, I think you can have the best change management concept, plan, everything. You might have goals in mind, but if you're not communicating it and you don't have that internal communication really set up for success, you're going to struggle. It's going to take a little bit longer, but change management inherently is going to be difficult. And comms is very important to it. But I hopefully answered that question. But I think it's, I think it depends on the situation. It depends on, what's changing, how is it changing, is leadership changing? But I think having open, consistent, and transparent as much as you can communications going out to the right groups is key.
You talked about catering it to different subgroups, and in my mind, I'm just thinking about that's a tall task that you're going through a lot of work to do that. And as we're talking about all these different solutions and strategies to collaborate better, I'm just thinking, is this an expectation of our roles as water industry professionals, or is doing all of that, like what you're talking about, is that kind of going beyond expectations?
I would say for my role in communications, I think something that if you talk to any communicator in the water industry, something that we would really want everyone that works in the industry to understand is that we are all communicators of our industry. No matter where you are, no matter what department you work in, you communicate. You have the ability to engage with the public, with elected officials, with stakeholders, anyone that is, quite frankly, everyone is impacted from the services that we provide because everyone drinks their water. So recognizing that comms is not owned by one team, it's owned by everyone. And I think that it is a struggle, Kevin, I'm not gonna lie. And I think that's why when you talk to providers, especially when they're smaller and they don't have the resources of, a team in comms, maybe they have one person or they have one person that wears multiple hats. It's really difficult to be proactive, and it's really difficult to stay ahead of the curve, because what we do behind the scenes, what Taya does and her team does, our field teams, there's a lot it's scientific. There's a lot of hard stuff there. And if you don't have that skill set or the means, it's difficult. So when I say that in just, in saying that hopefully you have a team, right? But not everyone's super lucky on that, but recognizing that comms is important and trying to leverage the resources you do have to try to make that happen, I think is important.
I'll also add for the communications part. I feel for people like you, Chelsea, and our own communications department, because sometimes we're coming from a technical background. So to be able to explain certain things to the communications department to make it a lot
Palatable.
plainer for the public is sometimes challenging. So I commend all the communication people.
It takes a skill set, but I would argue that even from our teams, but even everyone that I've ever met at any of our conferences that come from a technical background, the passion and the dedication and the willingness to explain things, it might get too technical, but there's a lot of passion in our industry. And I think that there's a missed opportunity for all of us to know that we're ambassadors of the industry, and that what we do can be technical, but the public does care about it and they want to know, right? And having that lens and, championing that from your own departments, leveraging when you can, proactive comms will elevate all of our ships.
Definitely. And you had mentioned like resources and having the resources available at your organization to be able to do all of this. So I'm going to throw this question to one of our service providers, either Amanda or Sandy. Do you think that collaboration is more function of organizations because of their resource levels, or do you think it's more the responsibility of the individuals, you as the project manager on a project, pushing the ideas to collaborate more and communicate constantly, or is it more of an organizational function?
To the individuals, what do you think, Amanda?
Definitely individuals. If I were to just say as a contractor, I think it's very important that the owner gets what their intentions are out to the community, and they can do that on a wide scale. I just kind of want to throw out here, the internet. Let's talk about the internet and how useful it can be, but at the same time, how there's a lot of misinformation. And people, hear stories and they talk to their neighbors and they get, their feel on things. But as a contractor, by going door to door, by directly contacting them, letting them know who's going to be there, what exactly we're going to be doing, giving them contact numbers directly to us, we're boots on the ground, definitely makes the projects easier. Because I know a lot of times, like, you guys have customer service numbers, but they say, oh, I've called customer service, I'm not getting a response. I'm not digging at you guys in any way. But it's a fact. So by having the contractor directly talking to the people, it makes the projects easier.
And
Definitely.
the reason why I say individual, organizationally, a lot of us were mostly all in pretty large organizations, and my upper management, they don't have time to be on the ground the day to day, understanding what's going on every project and setting that tone and all different kinds of fields. And there's just absolutely no way. It's really up to the individuals to be responsible for that, the collaboration and the communication.
Makes sense. So I want to throw another poll out there. Mona, if you could launch the Unsung Heroes poll, and we're going to ask the audience, who do you think, what group do you think are the unsung heroes of the water industry? And I'd love to hear that answer from all the panelists as well. Who do you think, what group is the unsung heroes and why? Throw it out to whoever wants to jump on it.
I'd say the customers. They're the ones who have to deal with this. They're the ones whose lives are being, they're being moved around and shifted and having to miss work just to accommodate us so that we can do this. Without them, none of us have jobs.
I think the operators, anyone in operations, including like production or distribution, they a lot of times are not included in the room when decisions are being made on projects, how money is being spent, and yet they know probably what needs to be done more than any of us. And yet they are left out of those important conversations and decision making, and have to deal with what is coming down from upper management.
I don't know if you want to go. Or Taya, sorry.
I say it's the water quality group for me. They are the basis on how we operate, recommendations for treatment, all types of things like that, I don't think they always get the recognition they deserve in the treatment process. So I would say water quality group.
I agree with everyone on here, but I'm going to pull another group in that I think sometimes gets glossed over, but your customer service team. For us, just as a large entity, we have a large team, but they also, American Water is in a number of states and they have to know all the things, and they deal, if you've never, my piece of advice, if you've never sat in on a customer service call, please do. Sit on a few of them, because you can empathize with the customer, but then you can also understand the need for concise, direct information for that team to be able to provide the customer experience that you're anticipating or expecting. So while I agree with everyone else on the call, I think that's also something that we always, especially in the comms world, right? We put together FAQs, we put together things, and you have to realize where they're sitting and the type of calls that they're getting, and how you can support them to make sure that they're able to provide the best experience, because they're dealing with what they're given, and depending on your footprint, it can be a lot. So I think, and when someone calls your call center or calls your team and they have a good experience, that just helps your reputation. It helps, just satisfaction in general, and it lets them walk away with a good perception of the whole company, right? It's just like the frontline workers. It's that first impression that counts. So want to round it out on the comms side, representing our comms people.
Well said.
Comms is so important. We got more questions about like when comms should be included in a project, and rather than hear from the comms person, I'm curious as to when everybody else includes comms in their projects.
I guess the initiation is the biggest point of contact, right before a project starts and right when it's getting started, I guess, on my side, if I'm answering that question correctly.
I think
And throughout, I mean,
yeah, I've been happy to see, it's changed a lot. 10 years ago, I don't think we were involved in community. We were, like Chelsea was saying, we were just kind of winging it. And I don't think the public was as informed and engaged either. So I think engineers and management were both on the utility side and the consulting side, just writing public notices and putting out public information. And it's been just eye-opening to me to see the benefit of bringing in actual communications professionals, and the higher quality messaging and materials that we can put together when involving them. So now it's something I always have a communications team on my projects. Now, if I go, back into treatment, it might be different. Like, it's a little different as far as the communications goes. And I haven't really thought that through yet, because I've been so focused on lead, which is very customer focused. So I'd be curious to see, like, Taya, from your day-to-day, as far as communications, do you see it benefiting on your side, and where maybe more or less would be helpful?
Definitely communications plays a part when there are emergencies that need to be communicated to the public. Sometimes, though, I feel like too much information can also be an issue for customers. So on day-to-day activities we have at the treatment plant, I don't think that much communication needs to take place. But overall, like, there was at one point we were doing community forums, and we would have a representative from the plant, and any issue customers have, we, any questions they have, we would try to answer those questions. So I wouldn't say like day to day, but quarterly, yearly, something like that.
Mhm.
And I just want to say, Tay, you got the resounding Unsung Hero Award from all our audience as an operator. So kudos to you. All right, so we're gonna start wrapping this up here, but before we switch over to our guest speaker, I have one more question for all of our panelists. So can you just provide one key takeaway or best practice from your experience that can help others improve their cross-functional collaboration in the water industry? And I'll toss it up to anybody to start.
I think real-time updates. And the reason I say that is because it's easier to keep up than to catch up. And when we have to work across so many people and so many hands involved, it's just easier to, like I said, I think that not necessarily the more people that know and have the information, but it avoids confusion down the line. So I think my key takeaway from everything that you guys do is just to let everybody know what's going on.
Yeah, shared team site or some sort of communication tool for the entire project team, where people can have all the information, all be looking at the same thing and be included. But again, I can't assume that everybody is checking it daily, so have to follow up and make sure
This is very true
it's
too.
getting to the right people.
I mean, I can go, Tay, if you don't, I'll let you close it up. Kind of, I think to echo kind of what Amanda and Sandy said, having some tool that will help you communicate efficiently and effectively, and everyone knows kind of where that is. And to kind of go back to the last question, just because I am a comms person, I think you strike a balance of when you involve them, high level, knowing what's coming on the pike. But I would say best key is think about the customer impact, right? At the end of the day, if you are doing something on the production side or operational side, and there's going to be an impact to the customer, the earlier you involve your comms team, the better. Because Amanda touched on misinformation and the internet, the pros and cons of it. If you're kind of at the 11th hour and you're like, oh yeah, by the way, we need to tell comms about this, there's already misinformation out there. So whether that's a proactive approach or a reactive emergency or proactive investment project, it's key. So I would say the earlier the better, but depending on customer impact. And that would be my takeaway is, pretend every day, think about the customer at the end of the day, whatever you do at your day to day. And if there's going to be a potential impact, think about how you can involve the teams that can help communicate that effectively and efficiently out to them.
All right, we started with Taya, we'll end with Taya.
I think some internal things that we have done, like I talked about the meetings, we created group text messages with those key unit people, leaders that would be affected and be able to communicate certain information. We've done things like that. More so, Sandy kind of touched on this before in dealing with projects. I appreciate when a consultant reminds me or checks in with me, because there are times I don't get to check my email at all on certain days, or I'm dealing with the emergency. So I appreciate that sometimes that extra attention. I know they're not required to do it, but I do appreciate that with consultants.
Prioritizing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good note to end our panel on as we transition to our guest speaker. So Amanda, Chelsea, Sandy, Taya, thank you for coming on and sharing all your expertise with us. This is a fantastic conversation. So thank you very much. This time you can all turn your cameras off, turn your mics off. You're done. You get to relax now. And I'd like to welcome in our guest speaker, Brian Frierson. So I'm going to let him turn his camera on, mic on, Brian. And I will get you spotlight so everybody can see you. All right. So Brian Frierson is the Assistant Public Information Officer at Passaic Valley Water Commission, and he's going to be talking to us today about the collaborative program that they are running and kind of tie in from some of that conversation from our panel. So Brian, I'm going to switch to your slides, and they're up now, so you can go ahead and take it from here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me. What a talented panel. I'm fired up because it's nice when you hear other folks speak the same language, other folks that are in the water industry. So I'm going to focus on speaking about municipal relationships and how important it is to keep our elected officials updated on certain projects. So we meet with our elected officials in our municipalities at Passaic Valley Water Commission about 3 times per year, sometimes 4, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending. Like Chelsea said earlier, sometimes we have to tailor our communication depending on what municipality we're visiting. And we provide updates on projects in these meetings. So we update them on hydrant replacements, water mains, lead service line replacements. The municipalities, from these meetings, they started providing us with their paving plans, which goes right into, I heard a lot of coordination and collaboration earlier. So it's opportunistic because if the ground is open, hey, that might be an opportunity to get in there. We don't want to upset residents and, open up a freshly paved road. So again, it just speaks to the collaboration and communication that I've been hearing this entire time. We also listen to their issues, such as restorations. That's one big issue that I hear, restorations after utility work. Overall, though, the communication and these relationships have blossomed, and I have yet to hear any negative feedback from us meeting with our electeds on a regular basis. And that also includes council meetings. We do virtual town halls, but be careful what you wish for, because when you start building good relationships, you're going to be getting calls on a Saturday night at 9, 10 o'clock. Hey, why is there no water on the street, in my city? Hey, Mayor, I'll get back to you on that. So I don't mind. I genuinely love what I do. So, and I just included a couple of photos from our last round of municipal meetings, which we're going to be kicking off this month, actually. The top picture is from the borough of Lodi, bottom is from the city of Clifton. And we bring in different personnel from Passaic Valley Water Commission based on the municipality. What kind of work is going on there? Is it hydrants? We're going to bring in our hydrant team. Are we talking water main replacements? We're going to bring in consultants. I know we're working with Suburban right now on some water main replacement projects, and also our engineering team. So yeah, we can move on to the next slide, please. So fire departments and police departments, I didn't add that at the top. It's very important, and I'll explain why, to establish and keep a good relationship with these folks. So we meet about once per year with fire and police. With the fire departments, we discuss hydrant replacements, out of service hydrants. They provide us with lists of out of service hydrants and unauthorized hydrant usage. And I'll give you an example of why we speak with police departments regarding unauthorized hydrant usage. September of 22, there was a neighborhood in the city of Clifton, which is one of our owner cities. This neighborhood was experiencing a spike in main breaks, discolored water. So we had to investigate. It was going on for several weeks, and we're like, this is not normal. So we got creative. We put a drone up. It was around 8:50, 9 a.m. in the morning. It was a September and 22, like I said. We put a drone up, and within 5 minutes of that drone being up in the air, we caught a line of contractors, paving contractors, street sweepers, lining up to use one hydrant in this neighborhood. So the goal there is to, of course, educate the police departments now, because anytime you have these types of jobs with contractors, there's always a cop on site. So now we bring this information to the police departments. Hey, no one is allowed to use our hydrants except for fire personnel or Passaic Valley Water personnel. That is it. Anyone else has to, be fined. There's ordinances in place in all of our municipalities to prevent these types of actions. And I'll just tell you real quick, it's pretty funny. A few months back, the town manager of North Arlington called me. He was so excited to tell me that they gave a paving contractor a $500 ticket. One of the cops caught them on a hydrant. They gave him a $500 ticket. So hopefully that contractor learned his lesson and he'll never do it again. But we also provide other ways for folks to get water. They can come to our yard. They can go to the Clifton DPW. There's other ways. So I'll go into a little bit, I know we're kind of short on time, but I'll go into training the fire departments. Survey 123 is a hydrant testing software that we implemented, and we actually provided our fire departments with iPads with this software. The old method was very antiquated, very old school. Paper, they would come by with a stack of papers like this. Here's all the hydrants. Now they can actually update in real time when they're actually in front of a hydrant. They can update real time on their iPads. Information, it's all one system, so we get it in real time. It's made things so much smoother, and they get paid quicker too for doing this hydrant testing for us. That was one issue that we ran into. It was because of the paperwork. It was taken some time for them to get paid. So, and also a great idea stemmed from these regular meetings. So we're actually going to be starting to create a video that's going to be implemented into the Passaic and Bergen County fire academies. So again, that's just an idea that stemmed from folks being in a room and talking. Really, it's as simple as it is. And the photo on the right is one of our rock stars, Raheem Hill. He's a hydrant supervisor. And that's a group of, it was about 20 or 25 firefighters in the borough of Prospect Park that we trained. It's important to train the newer firefighters and even the veteran firefighters, because over time, they can forget how to properly open a hydrant to mitigate water hammer and main breaks. Next slide, please. So media relationships, in my opinion and in my experience, it's one of the most important duties of a communications professional, because what these good relationships do is it allows you to tell your own story. And when anyone ever asks me, what do you do? As Chelsea knows, we do it all in comms, all the collaboration, all the coordination with all different departments. But it's important for us to be able to tell our story. So we've gotten to a point here where we have good relationships with folks at News 12, ABC. So I pitched a couple of stories, and I've got the links here. You guys can check them out later, of a few stories that we pitched. So we recently did an LSLR, lead service line replacement update on News 12 about the challenges faced. So we pitched that story. They liked it. They came out and covered it. And preparing for challenging weather conditions. That's another story that we pitched to News 12. So they just basically we wanted to let folks know how we prepare our reservoirs, which we are in the process of, we're going to start closing those off finally. How do we prepare our reservoirs? God forbid there's another Ida. Yeah, it's just coordination and collaboration. That's really what it all comes down to. And I believe, I know you guys were talking earlier about when comms should be involved in a project. I think beginning to end. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm just kind of blown away by how many different groups you are coordinating with. Because I recognize some people from the pictures. So, but you're meeting with mayors, you're meeting with police departments, fire departments, you're bringing in your operations team, multiple different groups of your operations team. You're bringing in your engineers, you're bringing in your outside engineers, you have your external comms people. How do you keep it all under wraps? Like, how do you keep it all moving forward in a productive manner?
My calendar has become my best friend over the last couple of years. Yeah, my calendar, all the coordination, all these meetings. Yeah, it's become my best friend.
Okay, but how do you manage those relationships with so many people and make sure that everybody is talking to each other and collaborating with each other?
So talking internally and including the folks internally. So I mentioned one of our hydrant supervisors, Mr. Hill, Alex Wells, one of our supervising engineers. She's fantastic. We even have to bring in the finance department, purchasing department sometimes. So it's really internal comms, I believe, directly affects external comms.
That's great. And with so many people, do you ever find that there's too many cooks in the kitchen?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you identify that? How do you make sure that you have the right people, not everybody?
So, I would say it's just a matter of trying it out and learning. If you have one meeting with this group, okay, maybe next time we don't need to bring, X amount of personnel, maybe just a couple of folks. So it's really a trial and error. And then eventually you will get it. Like anything else, it just takes practice. Practice makes practice. I've always heard that. No such thing as perfect. Practice makes practice.
Certainly. All right. Well, we're just about time, but thank you, Brian, for sharing about PBWC. I love everything that you're doing there. So again, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, you can go ahead and turn that video off. I'll stop spotlighting. And then before we wrap for today, I just want to highlight that coming up in June. On June 3rd, registration is open for the next session, Differing Landscapes. We'll be exploring the impact that utility size and customer demographics have on the way we serve our communities. We talked a little bit about it earlier about different resource levels, but we're going to be discussing issues like infrastructure funding, impacts of rates, and customer outreach. So go sign up now. And thank you again to all of our speakers. And I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for joining us and going beyond the surface. We'll see you again next time.